You're just trying to do the right thing. Maybe you've read that a 200-pound person should aim for about 100 ounces of water every day to stay healthy and hydrated. For many of us, that means reaching for the easiest option: bottled water. 5 bottles a day, every day, just to keep up. It feels responsible. After all, hydration is essential, and bottled water is everywhere. But what if that simple act, just trying to do what's best for your body, is fueling something much bigger and far more troubling? What if the path those plastic water bottles take, after you've tossed them in the recycling bin, leads not to renewal, but to a mounting crisis that stretches across continents and generations? Let's break it down. If you get all your hydration from single-use bottles, that's over 1,800 plastic bottles a year for just one person. Multiply that by a family, a neighborhood, a city, and soon you realize the numbers are staggering. In the United States alone, we consume about 50 billion plastic water bottles every single year. Now you might be thinking, that's okay, I recycle mine. But the reality behind that reassuring blue bin is far less comforting than you've been led to believe. We've been taught to feel good about recycling. Toss the bottle into the blue bin, picture it being transformed and reborn into something new, and walk away with a clear conscience. The truth? It's mostly an illusion. Of those 50 billion bottles, only about 23% are actually recycled. Even at its best, the U.S. managed to recycle just a third of its PET plastic bottles in 2023, the highest rate in decades. But that's just for the type of plastic most likely to be recycled. When you include all plastics, only about 5% actually get recycled. The rest? They're buried, burned, or dumped somewhere out of sight. And out of sight is the key phrase. For years, much of America's plastic waste didn't stay in America at all. Instead, it was packed up and shipped overseas, part of a global trade that sent millions of tons of plastic scrap to countries like China, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia. For a time, it seemed like a solution. These countries needed raw materials, and we needed somewhere to send our trash. But the system was fatally flawed. Much of the plastic we sent was contaminated or low quality, useless for recycling. It piled up in illegal dumps, it was burned in open fields, and it choked rivers and coastlines. Then came a turning point. In 2018, China said enough, banning nearly all imports of foreign plastic waste in a policy shift called National Sword. Suddenly, the convenient pipeline for American plastic slammed shut. But instead of forcing real change at home, the problem simply shifted. The U.S. and other wealthy nations started sending their waste to other Southeast Asian countries. Vietnam quickly became the world's 4th largest importer of plastic scrap, but struggled with recycling efficiency. Only about a third of what arrived was actually processed. The rest? It became an environmental catastrophe, leading to outrage and drastic action. In response, countries like Malaysia have started implementing strong new regulations. Malaysia now requires all scrap plastic imports to be certified and has imposed anti-dumping duties on imports from places like China and Indonesia. Other countries are following suit, closing their doors to the flood of foreign waste. The message is clear. We are not the world's rubbish bin. The global pipeline for plastic waste is breaking down, and for the first time in decades, the mountain of plastic bottles we use is coming back home. So what happens to all those bottles now? Most will end up in American landfills, where they can take up to 450 years to decompose. As they break down, they release microplastics, tiny toxic particles that seep into the soil, water, and ultimately, our own bodies. Microplastics are everywhere, from the deepest parts of the ocean to the food we eat and the air we breathe. Scientists are only beginning to understand the health impacts, but the early signs are troubling. Why is our recycling system so broken? It's a mix of economics and infrastructure. New plastic is often cheaper to produce than recycled plastic, so companies have little incentive to use recycled materials. The recycling process itself is expensive and complex, and most of our infrastructure is outdated and ill-equipped to handle the volume and variety of plastics we use every day. Worse, Many bottles are contaminated with food or other waste, making them unrecyclable from the start. But there is some progress. In 2023, the U.S. reached its highest rate of PET bottle collection since '96, and the average amount of recycled plastic used in new bottles is slowly climbing. Still, the overall numbers remain far too low to make a real dent in the crisis. The hard truth is that recycling alone will never be enough, not when we're producing and consuming plastic bottles at such an overwhelming rate. So what can you do? The answer isn't complicated, but it does require a change in mindset. The bottled water industry spends billions to convince us that their product is safer, cleaner, and more convenient than tap water. But in many cases, it's just filtered tap water sold back to you at an astronomical markup. By investing in a reusable water bottle and, if needed, a simple home water filter, you can cut your personal plastic waste dramatically. One person switching from single-use to reusable bottles can keep thousands of bottles out of the waste stream over a lifetime. But individual action, while powerful, isn't the whole solution. We need to demand more from corporations and lawmakers. Many beverage giants promise to use more recycled plastic by 2025. But as that deadline arrives, some are quietly walking back those commitments. It's time to hold them accountable, to push for laws that require companies to use recycled materials, to fund modern recycling infrastructure, and to take financial responsibility for the waste their products create. The story of a single plastic water bottle is a microcosm of a global crisis. It begins with the simple, healthy act of quenching your thirst, but it ends in a chain of environmental destruction with consequences that ripple across the world. We can no longer pretend that tossing a bottle in the recycling bin absolves us of responsibility. The world is running out of places to hide our waste, and the costs are piling up, on distant shores in our communities and inside our own bodies. The solution is not just about managing waste better. It's about creating much less of it in the first place. By breaking our dependence on single-use plastics, by pushing for systemic change, and by making conscious choices every day, we can begin to reverse the damage. The next time you reach for a bottle of water, remember, the power to change the system starts with what you choose to do next. The crisis is real, and it's urgent. But it's not too late to rewrite the ending.